And next on the program, we have Phil Roberts and his panel. This is from ISOC, which is a review of World IPv6 Day. So I'll hand it off to Phil. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. I'm excited to talk about World IPv6 Day. I have a few overview slides, and then I'm going to hand it over to Igor from Yahoo, and we've also got John Brzezowski from Comcast, Patrick Gilmore from Akamai, and John Woolwine from Cisco. He's going to be talking about Cisco.com, not Cisco products. So we were very excited about World IPv6 Day. It was a tremendous success. Happy to have participated, happy to have had a role in helping to organize this. What was it? Well, for 24 hours on June 8th, a bunch of websites turned IPv6 on their main page. So the people who kicked this off were Google, Facebook, and Yahoo, along with help from Akamai and Limelight. It wasn't about turning off IPv4. A few people said, you know, hey, are you going to turn off v4 on this day? No, that was never the plan. It's just adding IPv6 on the main website. And the goals were a couple, to motivate lots of people in the business to take IPv6 seriously and to get moving on making IPv6 production ready and rolled out, and to help also understand what issues still need to be addressed in order to have IPv6 as a production service on a large scale. This has been done before. Heise in Germany did this last October. They turned it on their main page for 24 hours. Examined their results, and they've enabled it permanently. There were a couple of large websites in Norway that did it later in the fall, and they've also enabled IPv6 on their main pages permanently. But this was global. I'm going to point out not only the global websites that participated, but websites in various regions around the world. And it was certainly the largest effort of its kind. So what were the motivations, breaking the chicken and egg problem? When we first started talking about this, the idea was, you know, can you get a bunch of websites to turn this on so that if I'm in a ISP and I want to motivate my management that we can roll this out, they will stop telling me there's no content. It's pretty clear that there is content now or in flight, getting there. Improving IPv6 connectivity by understanding the various issues that are still faced with IPv6 deployment. A lot of people jumped on and participated because it provided them a good target date to get IPv6 turned on. Clearly, in some of the people with some of the people I corresponded with, the background was, you know, well, I think I can get it done by that deadline, and they viewed this as a deadline for getting IPv6 turned up, and they did. Spurring organizations to create a plan for rolling out IPv6. And one of the really important things I like to point out about this is this catalyzed the industry to do something together. The internet is often an exercise in collaboration where nobody is in control, but a bunch of people agree to do something because it's good for everybody. And this was a great example of that. People made the choice that they wanted to participate in this because they thought that doing IPv6 was good for the internet and good for their business. And this is the kind of thing that we do as an industry. Global response. More than 1,000 organizations contacted us and said they would like to do something. And thousands of websites turned on IPv6 for 24 hours. We kept a reachability dashboard, and we documented a little over 400 sites who said they were going to do this, and most of them did do that. Some of them weren't able to get there, but most of them did do that. And we heard through other channels of a bunch of hosting companies that enabled lots of websites, and I'll tell you about some of those who are willing to let me share what they did. So these are some big companies that turned up IPv6 on June 8th. I think I missed Blogger. I think Blogger was also turned on. So those are the top 5 global properties according to Alexa. And in parentheses, I have Alexa rankings that I looked up a couple of weeks ago for these folks. So there were some really major websites that did this. And it was true around the world, too. If you were in various places in the world, you would see your major local websites turning it up. If you were in Korea, your number 1 and number 4 most popular sites in your country, Naver and Dom, also turned it up. If you're in the Czech Republic, these 4 are very popular local sites in the Czech Republic that turned it up. If you were in Brazil, there were some sites that turned it up also that are quite popular local sites. So, it's not only these major global properties, it's people around the world hearing about this and saying, yes, we're going to do this. And often what was actually going on is that that this kind of met their programs in flight. Cesnam owns all those properties in the Czech Republic, and it's my understanding that they were working pretty aggressively to get IPv6 rolled out already, and this gave them an opportunity to do it at the same time as a bunch of other people and see how it went. So where do we get thousands of sites? Oh, I wanted to put this up also since we're in the U.S. The United States government, many of the departments in the United States government turned up IPv6 for the day, and I put up a sampling of them. The ones that are on this slide in green are still running IPv6. They've just left it on. So where do we talk about thousands of people doing it? Well, there were hosting companies that have done this. Host.md is a hosting company in Moldova. They had already turned up about 4,500 of the domains that they host, and those were already permanently enabled. In Brazil, this company called Task enabled about 7,000 domains on the day, and they left them on. And the really interesting one to me was Domain Factory. Domain Factory enabled 700,000 domains on their hosting infrastructure for the day. They reported that they got 3 trouble tickets, I think, for the entire day. And they've said that as of July 4th, they're enabling it by default for all of their domains, which is 800,000. So if somebody doesn't want it, they can opt out. But as of the 4th of July, they're enabling 800,000 domains in Europe. So how do we document success? Well, improved connectivity. I think Igor is going to talk about this some. Large websites keep very close track of how well people can connect to them. And they've been measuring it, and they will have more to report on this as time goes by. Participating websites, we documented this through a reachability dashboard. And I think that the longer term goal is to get people to turn this up permanently. And we were tracking as people came in from about the start of March, we were tracking what people were doing on their IPv4 and IPv6 and how reachable it was. And it was pretty clear that some people just turned it on as soon as they could. And many people left it on as a result. Roughly 2/3 of the sites that we documented out of those 400 still have it on as of today. I checked with my colleague this morning, and he said it was right at 2/3. So, and this is a graph showing, kind of leading up to it a couple of days before, the day of, and the day after, whether or not people were actually reachable over IPv6 of the people who contacted us. So that's all I have to say by way of introduction. I'm going to hand it over to Igor now. And why don't we do Igor, Patrick, John Brzezowski, and John Woolwine? Does that sound like an okay order? Okay, thanks.
How's it going, everybody? Let me just pull this up. How do you make this go full screen? So this is a person. Hi, I'm Igor Gushinsky. I'm with Yahoo, and I'm going to talk about World IPv6 Day debrief, what actually happened, and what it looked like for us. So first of all, I'd like to thank ISOC for coordinating and organizing this event. Without them, it would not have happened. I want to thank RIPE and others for all the extra monitoring locations, given how a lot of the big commercial external monitoring providers don't have v6 ready yet. So without that data, it would have been possibly a bad day. The Google Chrome team, even though they're a competitor, major props for the work they did in working around the broken user problem and the fixes that they put in. And obviously all the organizations that participated and all the people who actually made v6 work. So again, why we participated in World IPv6 Day. We wanted to promote IPv6 adoption, and we wanted to break the chicken and egg paradigm. Well, the egg has now been hatched, so stop being chicken. This was also a last-ditch effort to help with the broken users problem. 21 months ago, approximately 0.078% of the users were broken. Right now, the number is about 0.022%. Again, that is a very large number for somebody who has over 700 million global users. But we wanted to see if all the websites or all the major websites were broken for the users on that day, if that would incentivize them to fix themselves. So what do we do in preparation? So one of the things we did is, despite the fact that 64 is about to be deprecated by IETF, we turned up a lot of 64 return tunnel infrastructure in all of our backbone serving locations. That gave us about 140 millisecond performance improvement for 64 end users. So anybody who is thinking of serving v6 content, I strongly encourage you to do this for your users. We dual stacked our front-end proxy infrastructure. We only did it in about 1/3 of our front-end locations because the other 2/3, the code isn't quite there yet from one of our major network vendors. And it's security related, so we weren't about to deploy. If you work for a major core switch vendor and you haven't heard from me yet, you don't know what I'm talking about, please see me, because we're going to go public with this in about 2 weeks. So we also had to modify a lot of code: abuse, geo-targeting, ad targeting, all of those kinds of stuff. And for World IPv6 Day, our IPv6 serving capacity was over provision times 1,000. Why we did it? Mostly because if we were off by even a fraction of a percent, that would be over provision by 100. And also, in our experience, overcapacity tends to hide a lot of problems, and we wanted to hide any problems that was going to happen. And that was actually the easy part. So we also ran 2 50-minute live tests ahead of time to make sure that it was going to work as we expected to, and all of our systems were going to work properly. And we did learn some interesting lessons along the way. One of them is that 5 p.m. is a really bad time to start a test. We learned that because one of our peak traffic tests was at 2 p.m. PST, which happens to be 5 p.m. Eastern. And our East Coast cluster saw a 6% traffic drop, like instantly, as soon as we did it. First minute, we were like, oh crap, what did we break? This is going to be really bad. And then somebody clicked the button and saw week-over-week stats. And every week, we actually see about 5% traffic drop. That's normal. Apparently, the Barney Rubble from Flintstones thing, the 5 o'clock, the bell goes off, people shut down their computers. This is actually why we jumped the gun for World IPv6 Day, and we started 17 minutes before, and we finished 13 minutes after, was to make sure that we're not doing anything right on our traffic inflection point. Also, good lesson is that just because you're monitoring something doesn't mean that you're monitoring over IPv6. You need 2 sets of monitoring things, and our GSLB infrastructure, we learned that lesson because it went, well, all these 6 locations are down, from this particular place. So, redirect users based on default locality, which was set up very differently. So with that in mind, this is how we prepared the infrastructure. And the other thing that we did is that we did a lot of user notification because we didn't want users to be surprised. So what you see here is for any user who, we have a beaconing system in place to detect broken users. We also had a window shade alert on the Yahoo front page that was going to notify those broken users. So as a user visited the Yahoo front page for the 2 weeks leading up to the event, if we detected that they were broken and we had the time to modify the page in time for the user, we would actually display that window shade at the very top of the page. That window shade linked to the Yahoo IPv6 help pages that were in 38 different languages, and they hosted our IPv6 test tool, which, if you read the NANOG mailing list, got some exposure. We also did a lot of PR and social outreach in order to, so users wouldn't be surprised if things broke. So we think that was pretty important for us. So what do we actually think about World IPv6 Day? So first of all, we consider the day to be a huge success. It's a great example of industry collaboration and the push towards more IPv6 adoption. The internet didn't melt down. It was the most anticlimactic war room ever. We actually had like 7 or 8 architects in a room behind the NOC. Like we're the highest tier of escalation in the company, just sitting there making sure nothing was going to go wrong. We didn't really see much. We had a minor traffic optimization issue where we redirected some percentage of UK users over to East Coast of US for about an hour until we noticed it and fixed it. It was as a result of the World IPv6 Day roll-in, but it happened at 1 a.m. BST, so we didn't even see it on our graphs. We also had a router card blow up on us, unrelated to V6, just in general. It was the fastest diagnose and repair that we've ever had because, again, escalation was there. We saw it. We fixed it really quickly. So that was actually, a benefit of World IPv6 there. Otherwise, more users would have been solved. Also, we saw no significant increase in our call center volume, and we attribute that to the front page beaconing, the help pages, and all that. So what did our users see? Well, this is a highly anonymized capture of Twitter feed for one user. And if you can't read it, I'm going to read it out. The user goes, "I'll soon be throwing this MacBook out the window. Work, you fool. Twitter's good, so's Flickr, but I want other websites too." And then the progress of this user trying to figure out why that's happening, and somebody who works for another content provider suggested they go to test.ipv6.com to diagnose it, and the user in the end goes, "Woohoo, I have defeated this IPv6 thing." Which just goes to show you, users really don't care, V4 or V6, they just want their internet to work. And we really do have to keep that in mind for everybody who says 0.22% is nothing. These are real users. So why do you hate your users? You want to make sure that things work, and it's great that this user got fixed, but there's probably many more like him that didn't. But this is something to keep in mind. So some numbers. So I'm going to caution, these are preliminary stats. We actually have two sets of statistics that were measured, one of them being done by a bunch of operations people, the other one being done by the research guys. The research guys have much more accurate stats, but the last 3 hours of the logs have not been processed as of like 45 minutes ago. So the numbers are still subject to change. But from what we know for a fact, we over 1.85 million users were served via IPv6. We had over 1 million visits to the IPv6 help pages, and about 0.229% of the users were served via IPv6. Yes, 0.229%. So France led the pack with over 3% of IPv6 enabled users, and most of that is coming from free.fr. So thank you for actually rolling out v6 to your end users. The US was at 0.37%. Those are peak numbers. Unfortunately, one of the metrics that we were tracking for World IPv6 Day is whether the breakage stats will remain the same or go down. From the preliminary data so far, the stats remain the same. On the other hand, it's kind of too early. We do want to see a week-over-week numbers, and we're not going to have those until like Thursday. So some pretty graphs. These are the per hour IPv6 traffic statistics as a share of v4 to v6 traffic. So you can see there's the initial pickup is probably as users get quad A's, and there's a little peak in Asia, then there's again peak in Europe. Here are per hour region breakdowns. As you can see, US and APAC is very low, and it's Europe that actually leads most of IPv6 users. IPv6 users by country. France by population has much fewer users than US does, but a lot more v6 users than US does. So these are the top 10. So this is a top 5 graph of v6 users by country per hour as a percentage of v6 traffic. You can see that France peaked out at over 3%. There's actually an interesting drop in traffic between 4 and 6 p.m. local time over there. That's probably as users went home. And it looks like v6 users at home have a higher v6 enablement rate than v6 users in their office. For some reason, and I don't know why yet, the v6 traffic in UK dropped off over the day and then picks back up at night. I don't understand why, but again, I literally got this 45 minutes ago. So we're still doing analysis, and if people want, maybe I can do a lightning talk on Wednesday as we have more data. This is kind of a zoom in of the same graph, but excluding France, because France skewed the numbers. v6 users by country and operating system. So in the US, most v6 users are, there's a lot of Mac v6 users compared to Windows. That's not the case in France. There's also this OS other that, my statistics don't show what that is, but we thought that was kind of interesting. These are users by country by browser, and all these stats are up so people can look at them afterwards. So in conclusion, that was a lot of work for 0.229%. So when we do this next time, could we at least break single digits, please? So eyeball providers in the room, we've done our part. We've showed that content could be enabled over v6. We're going to be, testing more, but the reality is this number has to be a hell of a lot higher. So please deploy v6 to the end users. So I guess that's it. We'll hold questions for the end.
Yeah, hold questions
for the end. Cool. Thank you, everybody.
I'm not sure how to run this thing either. I think that's mine. How nice.
The screen is hard to see.
So IPv6 day recap. Just a couple of quick stats. According to HE, 10.5% of networks are running v6. More importantly, Gartner estimates it'll cost 6% of your IT budget to move to v6. Obviously, this is not networks, but enterprises. The thing is, enterprises are what really drives things, right? I mean, we can set up all the v6 we want until companies that are not on the internet, that don't sit in this room, start doing v6. It's not going to matter that much. Unfortunately, not very many companies are actually ready for v6. Last week I was in Tokyo at Interop doing World IPv6 Day, and it was very exciting as they all stood there and sort of looked at me, kind of like you guys are, with blank stares. Everybody awake? Hi. Anyway, we looked up some stats for the APNet region. The important thing is that over 60% of companies are neither ready nor have allocated resources to doing v6. They haven't even started. Yet a couple of weeks ago, JPNIC started telling everyone no when they asked for v4 space. So you're sitting in Japan, you need a new IPv4 address, you don't get it, and you still haven't even started your planning for v6. I'm not sure how this has not come to a head yet, but hopefully somebody will get the message soon. Since people in this room seem to like statistics, I dug up some stats from actual data that Akamai's been doing. So the important thing to note is that the bar on the far right is tunneled. You'll notice that native IPv6 and native IPv4 have about the same latency. It's very nice. Tunneled is bad. So if you have tunnels running, please stop it. The situation's even worse for packet loss. And of course, as we all know, packet loss is much worse for performance than tunnels. So, than latency. So please stop doing tunnels. I find it really interesting that native v6 has actually got lower packet loss than native v4. I'm not sure why. It might be because somebody's appearing on v6 that doesn't appear on v4. Although there's lots of people that aren't appearing at all on v6. But whatever the reason is, don't use tunnels. Now on to the actual World IPv6 Day. I was asked to say what problems we found and what plans we have for the future. We essentially had no problems on World IPv6 Day. It was a non-event. Relatively. I mean, I don't mean to imply that there was never any single problem. But overall, compared to a normal day, it was essentially the same thing. We all sat in a room, or they all sat in a room and looked at each other, and there wasn't really any problems. The big problems were leading up to IPv6 Day. Weird things happen when you change a basic feature, a basic assumption. Like, for instance, an IP address is 32 bits, and the software doesn't like that if you change a basic assumption. And you find things that are hard-coded that you shouldn't have hard-coded or otherwise broken. So leading up to v6 Day was a very good exercise, and we found lots of problems and we fixed them. Unfortunately, on the day of, there just wasn't a lot of problems. So what are our future plans? Well, they're the same as they were before IPv6 Day. It's a major initiative in our company. Hopefully it's a major initiative in all your companies, or was a major initiative because you're already done, right? Everybody's finished with this. So we're just planning to roll out v6 to all of our products and get all the features on it, which is not true today. You can do v6. We have v6 customers. We had them before IPv6 Day. We have them now. But there are some features that are not v6 enabled, and we're trying to, clean those things up. Obligatory slide about Akamai. We have lots of nodes in lots of countries. We're on every single continent with v6, except, of course, Antarctica. Not a lot of internet in Antarctica. If anybody knows the guys at McMurdo, I'd be happy to talk to them and send them some free servers, so let me know. These numbers actually go up really quickly. You guys know we have a ton of servers out in the world. Well, the kernel is ready for v6. Everything's ready. We're waiting for the router in front of the Akamai servers to be v6 enabled. So these numbers actually, are kind of bursty. They jump up and then they sit down for a while as one or two networks decide to enable v6. If you're a network and you have Akamai servers and you haven't enabled v6, please do it now. And if you have and you haven't talked to us about it, please give us a call and send us some /64s and we'll enable v6 on your network. Very simple. This is an actual graph. You can go to this at akamai.com/IPv6, all lowercase, and you'll see this graph. This is what happened on World IPv6 Day. The peak hits per second were, oh my God, 458 hits per second. Anybody impressed? I wasn't impressed either. Right now, I was just looking over there while Igor was presenting, and we are doing about 12 million hits per second. 458 is not a lot. Now, in defense of this number, it's not really apples to apples. We have 3,000 some odd, almost 4,000 customers, and somewhere between 20 and 40 of them enabled v6. Akamai is a service provider. We don't decide things. The customers have to tell us to turn v6 on, and if they don't, we don't do it, because then we wouldn't get paid. The customers get cranky about such things. So we had a few customers turn on v6, not as many as we'd like, but to be honest, more than we, upper management anyway, expected when we started this thing. The peak actually hit at the very beginning. Apparently everybody was testing it at midnight, GMT, and then it kind of leveled off, as you can see. And then at the end, everybody turned it off and it went back down. So if you're a customer of Akamai, give us a call. We'll enable v6 on your website, and we'll go from there. One last thing, Akamai, along with other people on the internet, helped create something called the IPv6 readiness template. It's essentially a spreadsheet with a gigantic checklist. And it has things up at the top, red, green, yellow. I'm sure you know how that looks. And it tells you what you should do to be ready for IPv6. You can download it off this URL at the bottom, ntia.doc.gov/advisory/IPv6. And it'll sort of help you out. It's not perfect for networks, but anything that we can do to help you move to IPv6 is a good thing. We're worried that the next time somebody installs a cable modem or something like that and they don't have any more v4 addresses and they have to go through a CGN or some tunneling technologies or whatever it is that they have to do, the internet's going to get worse, and that's bad for everyone. So please do whatever you can to move everything to v6. Thank you.
I think it's afternoon now, so good afternoon. My name is John Brzezowski from Comcast. I'd like to give you a bit of a readout from our World v6 Day experiences. These are some high-level buckets that you'll find that some of this material fits into. I'll kind of just jump right into it. So we, to echo what was already said, I mean, it was largely uneventful for us. It was actually a little bit boring. I wasted, a 37-hour day for, it seems like nothing. But in the grand scheme of things, it was still very much worth it, and I'm happy that we did it. So some tidbits here. Protocol 41 traffic. It increased significantly on World v6 Day, tripled at a peak. This traffic in particular, dropped down after World v6 Day, and I call that out for a very explicit reason, because you'll see in a few more slides here that was not the case all the way around. 6 to 4 appeared to have a significant increase. So because I'm still in kind of analysis phase, like some of the other folks are here, I shot a little bit low, and I'm saying it was a 50% increase. But honestly, some of the information that we're seeing and some of the tools that we have indicates it was potentially much higher than that. And this traffic also remained post World v6 Day. based on some of the tooling. Interestingly enough, Teredo hadn't budged a bit based on what we had seen. And perhaps that's partly because we don't operate any Teredo infrastructure, and nor do we have plans to, but from what we could tell, the Teredo traffic was pretty much status quo. Our native v6 traffic increased about 6 times during World v6 Day, and it actually went up even further after World v6 Day. I was a bit surprised by that, and again, you'll have to kind of, give me a little space here. We're still kind of analyzing some of these things, but it's basically stayed up higher than pre-World v6 levels, not as high as, and it's basically stayed there, which I'm finding actually pretty interesting. So as you read some of the mailing lists or talk to some folks, there have been some internet properties that have basically left Quad A's in, and I think some of them perhaps are to acknowledge for some of this traffic. So as you guys know, we have a 6RD trial running that we're soon going to conclude. We did see an increase there as well. It was about 2x, and it does fluctuate. It wasn't like it didn't increase and then stay up. It increased and it kind of goes up and down. And just to give you guys some background here before I forget, so and this is actually a number that I don't have with me, but before World v6 Day, we had over 4,000 people using our relays, using the 64 relays. I'm still trying to get a number as to what that was during and after. But to give you an idea about the kind of the scale of stuff here, which I neglected to put in the slides, for native users we had a couple hundred users. For 6RD we had a couple hundred users, and on the enterprise we had quite a few folks who were native dual stack enabled. I put native enterprise traffic in here because it was an area where we saw a relative significant movement, particularly in some of our Philadelphia offices. It was like a 10x increase out of one of our main offices. And of course, we don't have native dual stack deployed everywhere across the enterprise, but we do have it on where we don't have native dual stack. We have we basically put an ISO solution into place, and we saw traffic increases there there as well. So there's a recurring theme here, right? We saw what we were hoping to see or expecting to see. From my point of view, I was kind of hoping to see a lot more traffic, but I'm not complaining, not at all. So from a DNS point of view, some interesting information that we have here. We're still seeing that at least half of the participants who had indicated that they were going to turn on Quad A's for World v6 Day are still publishing Quad A records. Now, I'm sure they're much smaller in nature in many cases, but still a interesting tidbit, regardless. We also didn't see our caching server metrics alter that much during World v6 Day. It was pretty much steady state, business as usual for the caching infrastructure. And frankly speaking, I was expecting to see a higher volume of higher volumes of A records coming back, or at least requests for queries because of the A records being available. And we're still vetting some of that data out as well. So from a measurement point of view, we stood up test-v6.comcast.net, as I'm sure a lot of folks did, and we saw a 4x increase in the number of tests executed on World v6 Day. It pales in comparison to what the original test-v6.com has as far as test volume is concerned. Nonetheless, it was a significant increase, and interestingly enough, and I was telling Igor this earlier, we saw a higher than expected number of people who had failed the one key dual stack v4 test. We're still trying to figure out whether or not that was skewed data from pre-World v6 Day testing that we had done, or whether that was bona fide users who were having problems on that day. But nonetheless, it was a lot of people went to the website. Very encouraging. Our call center volumes, just in case anybody's wondering, were normal, not and in some cases they were lower than normal. For this time of year. So, we were getting, in the war room, we were getting hourly updates on whether or not the call centers were, getting hammered. That certainly was not the case. So it was basically business as usual from a call center point of view. We did have one email that comes to mind right now that we had to address, and it was somebody who had some sort of misconfigured setup in their home. It's like the classic case that we all talk about and is in those numbers somewhere. So preparation. So I didn't put this in the slides, but we basically had pre-World V6 Day calls with all the folks that answer the phone with, for our customers, right? Not every one of 20,000 people, but we got information down to over 20,000 call center representatives. We had, bridges that had 200 people on them before World V6 Day, making sure that they were being debriefed. All sorts of, useful FAQs and information that people would need for World V6 Day. So if there's one thing that I will say, and I think this was echoed earlier, is that the preparation itself not only forced us to make sure that we tightened up some of the documentation, but it also created a lot of visibility, and a lot of people learned quite a bit about V6 and World V6 Day, which means they've been informed, right? Which is a very important thing for us to make sure that all the folks who interact with our customers are properly informed as it relates to V6. One of the other things that we had done is we sent, where we found people who had potentially broken IPv6 and were running Macs, we sent them a free upgrade kit. Obviously this is not, something that we can do in an unlimited fashion, but we did it. We'll probably, do that with whatever remaining number of kits we have, and then I'm not sure we'll do that again. The other thing that we do is people who have failed some of the failed scenarios in the test site, we queue them up for reach out, for outreach, to make sure that if they have something potentially wrong in their network, that we their home network, that we go ahead and proactively help them to fix that. I do not have any information about how that's going at this time. I think some of that's going to unfold over a longer period. We didn't enable some of our content over V6. There wasn't a quad A for www.comcast.net, but based on the work that we've done with the CDN, we were able to serve content over V6, and it went well. No complaints, and we're still trying to execute some ongoing analysis and to kind of dig a little bit deeper there. But that was definitely something that we had hoped to get in. We were certainly hoping for the quad A's on www, but that did not occur. So just some final comments. Thanks again, Phil and the ISOC. It was very much a successful day from our point of view. Uneventful, but successful. And we were expecting to see a bit more traffic. Again, I'm not complaining, but it was from that point of view, we were pleased with the outcome. And of course, we just like everybody else, we identified opportunities for improvement. There are some things we need to make adjustments on. There was nothing terribly tragic, however, which is also an important point to note. Oh yeah, a couple more things here. So shameless plugs. Okay, NOG Lab. You guys should definitely stop by and visit the NOG Lab. Some of the gear that you'll see there, particularly on the broadband side, is exactly what you would be using if you were a Comcast trial user for IPv6. And there's also some giveaways, I think, that you could sign up for or complete a survey. So that's how we'll suck you into, offering your personal information. And of course, we are in Denver, and this is one of the first areas where we've announced our IPv6 trials. So we are looking for more people to participate in those trials. I cannot begin to tell you that from our point of view, this was not what I was expecting to have a difficult time with. But I will tell you, aligning interested parties with infrastructure that's ready has proven to be a significant challenge for us. So anybody who lives particularly in the Littleton or Inglewood areas, or wants to, wants to even just verify whether or not you're eligible for the trial, please let me know. We can do a pretty quick check, and you should probably stop by the NOG Lab to do that. And even if you're not eligible today, at some point in the not distant future, the likelihood is you will be, and we'll want to make sure that we have a way to get in contact with you. Last but not least, we have a very small number of some T-shirts that we had made for World IPv6 Day. First come, first serve in the NOG Lab. And when I mean a handful, really, there's only like 6. So, just, if you want one, stop by. And thank you very much.
My name's John Woolwine. I'm from Cisco. I'm actually from the IT organization within Cisco that's responsible for Cisco.com. And we did participate in World IPv6 Day by advertising a Quad A DNS record for www.cisco.com. As you can imagine, the business drivers are pretty consistent. It's good for the internet. It's good for our company we're in. But within Cisco IT, we had some opportunities that a few of us recognized early on. First was just to raise internal awareness within our own IT organization about IPv6. IPv6 had largely been the domain of network engineers within our IT organization. The other parts of IT really weren't very well versed around IPv6 or didn't really understand how it would involve them. We found that changed, and we had a great opportunity there. It was also an opportunity for some safe experimentation. We could make some mistakes here. We could afford to make those mistakes. And we also found that the design we went with is something we could potentially reuse on an ongoing basis when we do hit the decision eventually to advertise that Quad A on a permanent basis. So I thought it would be good just to give a quick view on what the solution looked like for us. You'll see the IPv4 infrastructure that's existed as part of our production environment on the right-hand side here in blue. What we did for V6 Day was we set up a reverse proxy that could very simply just talk V6 out to the internet and talk V4 back to our existing production environment. And we stood this up in somewhat of a sandbox network. It wasn't quite production and it wasn't quite a lab, but it's an area of our network where we can do some rational experimentation. And we knew we wanted to have it in that environment to be able to move quickly and to make some changes and do some experimentation where we couldn't do things quite that agilely in our production environment. So as you can see here, DNS is obviously a critical part of this, and one of the points here that I think is important for any enterprise that's going to go after an IPv6 internet presence is if you're using a content delivery provider, for us we're using Akamai, is to have that conversation very early on with that provider and work out some of the mechanics behind DNS. Those can get a little bit tricky. Why don't we move on here since we still probably have some Q&A we want to do. A little bit about the numbers. So preparation for us, we went from concept to delivery in roughly 3 months. It involved collaboration across 18 different teams within Cisco. About 10 of those teams were just in Cisco IT. And we did, like a lot of these other people, did do a brief test prior to the June 8th date. We did a 4-hour test on a Saturday evening and got comfortable with our methodology and our solution in that environment. The day itself, we saw between 1 and 1.5% of traffic come via IPv6. And like everyone else here, we didn't get any support calls. We didn't get a single call from anyone that was complaining about connectivity to www.cisco.com. No calls internally, no calls externally. So very non-eventful. But I will say, like everyone else here, a lot of preparation going into it. We just had kind of a 24-hour snooze there where everyone in the war room was kind of yawning. Some considerations and lessons learned. First around geolocation. So geolocation to us is important because of encryption export policies and our ability to download software or allow the download of software. It turned out that we kind of dodged a bullet here. Our geolocation service for software downloads doesn't actually sit behind the www.cisco.com domain name. It sits behind a different domain name that we did not advertise a Quad A for. So we got kind of lucky there. But the folks that own those geolocation services kind of had an eye-opener there that V6 is something they definitely have to pay attention to. Web analytics, another area that that we were looking at very closely early on. It turned out that the existing web analytics systems that we had supported IPv6. We could store v6 addresses. We could report against those v6 addresses. I talked about content delivery providers being very important for us in this exercise. Another area was the folks doing testing and QAing of IPv6 content and applications that sit behind www.cisco.com. Getting those folks IPv6 access into the network was absolutely critical for success here. And I think the one thing for us was we realized that we'd probably have to accelerate our internal rollout of IPv6 just to support those kinds of activities in the future. And the last point I have here is probably the biggest takeaway from this effort, this World IPv6 Day effort for us, and that is finally we got some awareness and some engagement beyond just the network team in our IT organization. This started touching every team all the way up and down the IT stack, and for the first time some of these people were getting their first view into IPv6 and what it actually meant to them, that they had to step in and get involved. Not only that, but the involvement and the awareness went from the engineer level all the way up to the VP and even the CIO level. So I think the whole exercise has really brought IPv6 to the forefront for our IT organization and has set the table for some pretty good discussions in the near future about where we go from here. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. I think we've got some time for questions. I'm going to prime 10 minutes for questions. Okay. So maybe quickly, if the panelists can say, how did the fact that this happened and the fact that you were part of it in some way change priorities or timetables for V6 in your organization?
So, can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. So, at least from my personal point of view, Phil, I like to see more people have broadband IPv6. I think after the uneventfulness of the day, I thought to myself, well, we got to make sure that more people have it, right? I mean, from a Comcast point of view, I mean, we've been at this for a while, but it's not just about just about Comcast. I mean, I think a lot of other companies need to really seriously think about how they're going to take V6 to people.
Okay. You gonna go, Igor?
So from my point of view, the World IPv6 Day itself, it didn't really change what we wanted to do. The nice thing that it did is it put a date that it had to be done by, and dates help. So that basically huge success. Very helpful.
Dates help as
but
well.
actually, so John, now you think that more users, broadband users, should get V6. Do you have a date?
I don't have a date, but I can tell you that we are talking about at least the first production launch later this year. So I mean, and anybody who's anybody in the room, and I think a lot of you are, who's had to really do the work to put a new technology into the network. Well, you know that it doesn't happen overnight, right? But like I said, we've been at this for a while. So given where we are and as far as the trials are concerned, we're hoping that we have at least one market launch later this year. I can't offer a specific time frame. We have something in mind internally, but once you get the first few under your belt, we should see how it goes from there.
If I can add, I just got a pretty funny statistic that you might want to, it's kind of funny, at least for me. Over 30% of our IPv6 hits by volume were actually internal health checks. So we need more broadband users.
John?
Yeah, just getting back about the what World IPv6 Day has done in terms of accelerating our efforts. Before we signed up to do this, our own web presence, our own V6 web presence, was sort of an interest of a small group. What's happened is that interest has moved way up the chain in IT and is now a conversation at the VP level and at the CIO level. So I think now that we have those people at the table, and given the success of the day and the fact that we saw very little impact in terms of our own user base, it's something that I look forward to actually happening sooner rather than later, and I know there's going to be a great conversation that's going to take place here within the next 2 weeks on this subject within my company.
Patrick, did you want to say? I know what you're...
As a service organization, remember, we're just doing what our customers tell us. So I'm really happy World IPv6 Day happened. I'm really happy that it was a non-event. I just wish more people had participated, more customers had enabled their website, and as everybody else said, there were more end users to go to those websites. But that's going to happen whether we like it or not, and probably sooner than we want.
Okay, so questions?
Scott Hogue, GTRI. There was some concern that attackers were going to take advantage of World IPv6 Day to do reconnaissance scans or attacks. Did any of you see any of that type of behavior on that day?
So our chief security guy gets a question, does Akamai ever get attacked? He says yes. People say how often? He says one time. It started in 1997. And if every packet of v6 had been an attack packet, we just, to be honest, probably wouldn't have noticed. There just wasn't enough traffic to matter. And there was no security holes or anything like that came to light, thank God. So essentially, no, we didn't see any increase in attack traffic, we didn't see any abnormal traffic, and we didn't find any security problems.
Cisco, we didn't have any security incidents either. A little bit of poking and prodding, but nothing out of the ordinary.
We had 2 abuse engineers actually sitting in the war room with us, and we saw nothing out of ordinary for v6. There is a v6 attack or possible v6 attack issue that we've discovered that we're working with vendors to resolve. We've notified most of the World IPv6 Day participants about it ahead of time in the workarounds for it. We decided to keep it quiet because my iPhone can take out most data centers. So again, any vendors of core switching gear, if you haven't heard from, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it will behoove you to find me later today.
Okay, next. Oh, did you? Sorry. Oh, okay. Next question.
Jason Schiller, Uginet, Verizon. Igor shows that the IPv6 broken host problem remained unchanged at 0.022%. John, you said preliminary analysis suggests that dual stack v6 case failure rate was higher than expected. But then you also said that there were no increased calls in general, and you only had that one report of a broken IPv6 user. My experience on the Verizon side has been similar. We did not see any reports of broken hosts, yet the problem still remains, and I think Igor has suggested that it's still bad enough that we can't remove whitelisting. How do we address this issue?
So one thing that we're doing is that the window shade that we put up 2 weeks ahead of time, we're continuing to run it. We don't know what its impact is because not taking my Yahoo hat off for a second, in my opinion, most window shade things, they don't work terribly well until the user is actually flat out broken. As we saw from the Twitter post, some users are fighting this, others are, others might have remained broken, and maybe they find that, oh, it's only for a day, left it alone. Maybe the next step is World IPv6 week, and maybe that will fix it. Or maybe the next step is we can't do anything about it, and we have to maintain whitelisting. We're going to keep running numbers. But also, something people have to keep in mind is that, unfortunately, NANOG is the week right after. These statistics aren't really accurate until you have a week-over-week view, because Friday stats are way different. Like I saw, when you're measuring into the noise, and 0.003% is measuring into the noise, you need a couple of data points to make sure that it's accurate. Because the numbers that I have on breakages show that the day before we were at 0.022%. The day after we were actually at 0.023% brokenness, so it's like normal variation. On Friday, we were at 0.19%. So it's much lower, but until I see a week over week next Friday, I can't give you a good comparison for what's happening. So maybe we fixed a couple of users, maybe it helped, but so far the early indications are that they have not.
You know, the other thing, Jason, is we're gonna put some measurement tools embedded like most everybody else has. But after the day is done, I mean, some of our portals are not nearly as popular as Facebook, Google, or Yahoo, right? So we're gonna continue to gather some of that information. I mean, after the day is done, the other thing that I would follow up to my earlier reply to, I think it was to Phil or whomever, about what's next or whatever else. And I fully, wholeheartedly believe that we need more people who have broadband. But at the same time, I'd like to have more quality records to go with them. And I understand what the problem is. I mean, we all do, right? But after the day is done, we have to have them together, right? You have to put them together. And after World V6 Day, I thought to myself, we should just leave it on. I mean, honestly, I know that's not necessarily realistic, and it kind of maybe in some cases not practical, but we need them both, right? And I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, some days I think to myself, maybe it's just a number we're gonna have to live with, and find a way to live with it. I don't know. I mean, people often come back and say, well, isn't V4 broken like that too? In some cases.
So to get back to John, and it's actually our analysis, we actually have to remove about 5% of the results because we see V4 brokenness or flaky DNS or some other things that make it unreliable. So I'm going to talk to John afterwards. Maybe they're not doing that. I mean, we're in like Rev 6 of our beacon testing, and we have a lot of users that we beacon against. There's a lot of oddities of different browsers, and you have to keep that in mind.
Okay. Do we have time for one more question, or are we done? We're done. So thanks, everybody.